I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship.
This is your daily dose of all things royal. Hello, 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 my gorgeous good-looking friends. I'm back, and you can bet this video is going to be a banger. If you haven't seen the past 3 episodes of this psychological warfare Harry and Meghan have unleashed onto the world, please go ahead and check that out so you can understand the context of what I'm about to show you. But before you go ahead and do that, please do the kid a favor and hit that like button. We are fighting up against big tech censorship, and no doubt that all of these videos are being suppressed. As you can see, the numbers are quite low for the amount of subscribers I have, which does indicate that there are certain things being said in these videos that they don't want you to know. If you don't believe me, here's what Mike Benz had to say about it.
The Pentagon was already working on these AI censorship superweapons to stop ISIS. This was a technique called natural language processing, which is this ability to basically scan the entire internet, all tweets, all Facebook posts, all YouTube videos, because everything we say on YouTube since 2009 or whatnot has gone into closed captioning at YouTube. So there's a transcript. Well, the AI can read that transcript and it can scan for keywords, pre-crime analysis, whether or not you support or oppose the thing you're talking about, or whether you're talking about something that's sensitive from NATO's perspective. Some Ukrainian oligarch who's on, CIA payroll does something embarrassing, and, Russian YouTube videos or Facebook posts or tweets are amplifying that. Well, that can all be turned down so that nobody knows about the story because the AI is now reading it.
Now, as I have been talking about in the past 3 videos, Harry and Meghan have been running a military-grade censorship operations that had been launched onto not only Americans, but also the rest of the world. This was done in alignment with the Biden-Harris regime, as well as the Department of Homeland Security. Do not underestimate Harry, as well as his family's close alignment and relationship with NATO, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, as well as the World Economic Forum. As I've said before, the objective for both these 2 idiots that you see here is to prevent the rise of domestic populism. And as I've stated, while the objective might be the same, the goals and motivation are different for Harry and Meghan. Meghan is doing this for her reasons, and Harry is doing this for his reasons, as you can see up here. So now, as we recently discovered last month, the narratives that we were fed in the very beginning about Meghan Markle's childhood and who she is, as well as all those photos and videos that were digitally altered and manipulated to craft a narrative that now I no longer trust or believe. And that is my God-given right. You don't have to believe me, and that's fine. That's your right. But what you do not have the right to do is take away my ability to express those opinions. And that is exactly what Meghan and Harry, as well as all the people who have been behind this, have been doing. Not only to me, but so many others. Remember, this whole thing is about getting the control back on the information flow, what people can see and what people can say, boiling down to really cognitive security and influence. In order to conquer and get that back, Russian psychological warfare tactics were then used on the public, particularly Americans. Now, if you had the chance to look at the other videos in this series, I walk through this framework showing you the various tactics that Meghan and Harry used in various disinformation campaigns that they launched onto the public. This framework has evolved since 2017, and it's now called the Disarm Framework. I think what's really important to understand here is that the Disarm Framework, which Amit inspired, has been formally adopted by the European Union and the United States as part of a common standard for exchanging structured threat information on foreign information manipulation and interference. Covertly, it's being used as a psychological weapon against the public. And they were very much aware of what they were doing because as of up to 2022, Disarm Framework was an open source master framework for fighting disinformation through the coordination of effective action, meaning naming, shaming, bullying, coercion, intimidation, cutting off bank accounts, all to drive behavior as well as suppress and censor opposing or dissenting views that threaten democracy. But then, when it was exposed that Disarm had been part of the core foundation and seeds of this censorship industrial complex, the Disarm Foundation quickly updated their website to cover their asses in 2024. And now, the Disarm framework is an open source master framework for fighting disinformation through sharing data and analysis and coordinating effective action. It also says here it includes actions seen in countries with different ethical values, such as censorship and action observed in countries with authoritarian governments. But we advise caution to anyone using it. They weren't cautioning anyone in 2022, and why the need of saying, of course, every user must consider for themselves what actions would be ethical? The immediate question that comes to my head is like, why do you have the need to put that statement in now when you didn't put it in as of 2022, unless you know that people have been using this framework unethically, like in the instance with Harry and Meghan. And this is what we're going to talk about now. Harry and Meghan have been running a few disinformation attack campaigns using this framework. We have the royal family attack campaign, we have the UK media attack campaign, and then the biggest one, in my opinion, is the social media attack campaign. And that's the one that we're going to use with the framework to show you how they executed these attacks on innocent, unsuspecting people and the online harm that they inflicted on so many. For Harry and Meghan, the reason why they chose to hurt innocent people was because of inflicting damage on people's mental health in order to turn around and push their agenda of rebuilding a better online space with guardrails, otherwise known as more regulation on clamping down on what people can say and what people see. And the whole point to this, at the end of the day, is for the advantage, not only from a domestic political advantage, economic advantage, geopolitical advantage, and ideological advantage. And when we look at the target audiences that Harry and Meghan went after, they were the people who could critically think, who did not believe everything that was said, as well as supported the agenda Meghan and Harry had been on as these global citizens, those believing in these woke ideologies such as equity and DEI and all this bullshit that's forcing socialism onto the Western world. And they used race as the wedge dividing people and inciting this anger and hatred online. So the targeted audience that they went after was anyone who had a substantial voice online that challenged the narratives that were being force-fed to the public. Some of those included like her history, some of those included her pregnancy. I think for the most part, anyone who did challenge the pregnancy were automatically put on a hit list to go after. Predominantly, they targeted specifically middle-aged white women. And this targeted audience that they use, a predominantly white middle-aged Caucasian women, was feeding into the narrative of white supremacy. I mean, literally ripping off the scab here in the United States around racism and causing more divide. I mean, we all heard Christopher Boozy on the Netflix mockumentary. It's about hatred. It's about race. No, you guys made it about race. You guys decided to create these false narratives to divide people. Now, it's very clear here that the bully for hire, Christopher Boozy, in his report, specifically says the group was composed predominantly of middle-aged Caucasian women located in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia. Members of the group used derogatory terms when referring to Meghan Markle and her black supporters. Several members of the group often created derogatory memes to share outside of the group on Twitter and Instagram. The group would be the catalyst of a coordinated and sustained smear campaign targeting Harry and Meghan and spanning multiple social media platforms. So here we go. This defamatory report, right off the bat, tells you who they were focused on in going after. And the intent with these reports, because it wasn't just one report, it was 3 reports that went after specific people, was to spread hate, was to defame them, and was to intimidate them into silence. These reports were racially motivated, and they were used to demean and humiliate, as well as cause emotional, psychological, and physical distress. These reports were used in promoting hatred online, and it was racist. I mean, they were promoting racism. And the whole purpose of Meghan and Harry doing this is to preserve this ideological superiority as well as unbridled infliction of suffering onto others. And the goal of this report really was to cause harm directly or incite others to harm these people. It really did aim to stigmatize Yankee Wally, Murky Meg, according to Taz, by singling them out. And the whole point of targeting them and singling them out was to show everybody and make them an example of what could happen if you did challenge the narratives of Meghan Markle, or if you said something that wasn't in line with what she was forcing down our throats. These were obvious attempts to denigrate and disparage these ladies. Now, of course, the whole objective here in causing harm on innocent people is to stop the behavior of people going against and challenging Meghan's narrative. At the same time, doing these reports and having the Sussex Squad boost Meghan's reputation, it makes her look like she's on this crusade to save the world from online harm, which is quite the opposite because here she is actually doing the online harm. As they had their target audience in focus, the plan was to degrade them and to distort the truth and paint them in a light that was discouraging, that was humiliating. And this was the focus. Understand that this was all for the show. To show the world that, yes, online is not safe. Look what happened to Meghan and how she became so suicidal, which, again, played into the narrative that we were forced to believe, which, again, I say, I don't believe. Before anyone knew that they were colluding in this censorship industrial complex, that kind of statement could have gotten you demonetized or deplatformed because from behind the scenes, while all of this was going on, they had been working with the social media companies and getting people taken down. Hopefully that explains to you, if you were around that time, why it just didn't seem fair. Like, why is it that Christopher Boozy gets to go around and harass a pensioner as well as troll and mock Murky Meg and according to Taz? Well, it's because behind the scenes, they all had been protected. That's why they had been so brazen and so bold to be so nasty and so vile. Another piece to this humanitarian scam that Meghan and Harry are running is this concept of community, wanting people to have community. But one of the major tactics that was being used here was to divide the community up by infiltrating the community and causing division. And the thing that's really disgusting about this is that they specifically targeted people who would be susceptible to falling for this manipulation. Hence the reason why they went after senior citizens or pensioners and manipulated them into scams like what happened with Yankee Wally. Or how about going after someone who has a mental health problem and has been open about it, and they use that as a vulnerability to go ahead and attack. Before I show you the hard evidence, let's talk a little bit about who Christopher Boozy is, just to catch everybody up in case you're new here.
It's about hatred. It's about, race.
So Christopher Boozy is the CEO of a company called Bot Sentinel, and up until Elon Musk took away his API access, it is supposed to be a Twitter analytics service in which the service was used to detect and track so-called inauthentic Twitter accounts, as well as tracking disinformation, inauthentic behavior, and targeted harassment. Now, while they say that they are a free and nonpartisan platform, the work that they have done seems hardly the case. Some of the work included here, leading up to the election 2020, Bot Sentinel was tracking and policing conservative speech, deplatforming hundreds, if not thousands of people. We have Meghan Markle, obviously, of course, where they were tracking and policing Megxit speech, where for the most part of the community have similar views to conservative views. The biggest view that both these groups have in common is Christianity. Soon after doing the Meghan Markle paid reports, he then focused on Kamala Harris, and then after that became the Brazil elections and tracking Bolsonaro supporter accounts on Twitter. He also was involved in supporting the Amber Heard lawsuit, as well as being a champion and advocate for reducing misinformation, or I want to say truth about the Pfizer vaccine, amplifying counter information. Knowing what we know now about this censorship industrial complex, there's a high probability that Christopher Bouzy is a government cutout or proxy. So, looking at Christopher Bouzy's school of thought here in this tweet, it says, hate accounts have convinced themselves that someone sharing screenshots of their tweets and videos harassing and targeting others is somehow bullying. They actually believe shining a spotlight on their targeted harassment is bullying. He also says something similar here too. Sharing screenshots of your tweets and or YouTube videos isn't targeted harassment or abuse. If you don't want people seeing your unhinged ramble effery, then don't tweet it. Now, if we're going to go by this school of thought, then the plan objectives of targeting an audience that is predominantly middle-aged white women would definitely be classified under hate. So looking at Christopher Bouzy's account as a hate account, then posting screenshots of his tweets and things that he has said is just putting a spotlight on his cyberstalking, harassment, and bullying. So now, keeping with this train of thought that Christopher Bouzy has made in his tweet, on April 8th, 2022, Christopher Bouzy decides to give a public broadcast on the platform formerly known as Twitter. This is before Elon Musk had bought it over or we knew anything about this censorship industrial complex. Now, in this public broadcast, Christopher Bouzy goes ahead to explain the winning strategy on tackling these so-called hate accounts. He goes through the various tactics that were used on unsuspecting innocent people and singled out why they used Yankee Wally.
Yankee Wally, we realized early on that she would be the one that would go first. And if I would show you guys the notes that were written down.
So there you go, folks. They literally were watching who they could go after and figuring out who would be the most vulnerable to target in order to shut down and make an example of. Yankee Wally not only was a threat to Meghan and Harry, but it also gave away information that many of us probably didn't even realize, exposing Meghan for the fraud that she is. I mean, anything that was said around Meghan's pregnancy and that bump, as well as some of the lies that she has told, and also the strange behavior of the Sussex Squad in their fundraising and evidence of money laundering. Yeah, I mean, they were doing everything they possibly could to shut her up because not only was she presenting facts and evidence of it, but she also was entertaining and people just loved listening to her. Meghan Markle and team saw that Yankee Wally was quickly gaining a following and they needed to stop that. Hence the reason why she was the target and public enemy number one.
We just knew that Yankee Wally would be the first. Because of her former attacks on OMAD, other people. She was the one who would be the most unhinged and the one that would just not be able to let things go.
So I want people to understand that Christopher Bouzy is not giving the full picture, and he's actually using two tactics here: distortion as well as dismiss. So he's not telling you all the things that were going on with Yankee Wally and how she had been attacked first and what Omid Scobie did to her for her to respond or to speak up about it. He's also not saying that they saw Yankee Wally and knew that they could take advantage of her. These predators saw Yankee Wally's vulnerability as well as her naivety, and they took advantage of that. And that's why they went after her so hard. And it was all to make her the example so they could take that brush and paint all of us in the same category. They set her up, they scammed her, as well as not only did they demoralize and dehumanize her, but they also removed her from any type of community that she could possibly have online. This is what Christopher Bouzy is making out to be an attack on Omid Scobie.
Those of you that have been following me for a while, and I know there's loads of you, you didn't see this, probably not, because it was a DM that Scobie sent to somebody, and the somebody who had been, as you could say, an enemy of mine, suddenly saw the other side of the coin and got in touch with me by email and apologised. There's still some good people about.
So this beef that Omid Scobie had on behalf of Meghan goes back to October 16, 2020, with Omid Scobie reaching out to this person saying, "Hi, do you know which video Wally said bloody foreigner?" Trying to get her account shut down. Now, this is a journalist, mind you. And this person responds back, "Hi, Omid. Yes, I will find it and give you a timestamp. Also, if you can give me a moment." And he writes back, "No rush." So the person proceeds to give the link to the video and writes, "Is where she calls you a foreigner. I've been called that too many times myself. It's foul. Also, earlier, she accuses you of creating those messages yourself here," and puts a link to another video. "I'm on it. If I see anything else, I'll send you the information." So right here is a perfect example of how they were using the tactic of abusing terms and services of these platforms in order to get people removed, silenced, suppressed. In this case, the angle that they would have been going after is racism and flagging her account for cyberbullying and harassment due to so-called intrinsic characteristics.
And he said, "Do you want me to send you the DM that Scooby sent me?" That was one of the most amazing things ever, because this DM has now, along with one other tweet that he put out, which is this one, has proved to be Scooby's downfall. Because all the time that we've been saying, "Oh, Chris Boozy, Sunshine Sacks, Yankee Wally is about to go through some things, save this tweet," and look at that, 19th of February, 22nd of February, they were both working together.
Originally, this abuse was not supposed to be for Yankee Wally. It was supposed to be for the Duchess of Narcissus.
Once again, looking at my tweets, I focused on certain accounts. So I didn't really go after Yankee Wally in the beginning. In the beginning, it was really the Duchess of Narcissus, or however you pronounce it. You kind of go after the low-hanging fruit first.
So here, Christopher Boozy is admitting that they were targeting the so-called low-hanging fruit, or the people who didn't have that big of a following, but had the potential to gain a big following. So the goal when targeting those people was nipping that in the bud before they grew. Like, take, for instance, the YouTube channels. They would go after anybody under 50,000 subs, because if they can get them pulled down before they went over that, the backlash would have been minimal. And in this case with the Duchess of Narcissus, they saw her as a threat because not only is she intelligent, but she was also talking about things that Meghan was not ready to handle as yet or introduce as yet, such as Meghan's political aspirations.
The Duchess of Narcissus, or however you pronounce it, you kind of go after the low-hanging fruit first. And she was suspended. All her accounts were suspended.
And he says nothing more about the Duchess of Narcissus. He doesn't explain what was going on leading up to this suspension, as well as what was going on after the suspension. We're going to get to that subversion in a bit, because this effort that was given to targeting the Duchess of Narcissus to not only get her suspended, but then to follow her across multiple platforms on Getter, on YouTube, on her blog website. Not only did they dox her hard, but they found it funny that she was deplatformed. And even though the Duchess of Narcissus was no longer on the Twitter platform or had a voice there, Christopher Boozy and Sarah Data, who we'll get to a little later on, continue to lead the charge in this harassment campaign against her. They followed her and watched what she was doing on YouTube. They were watching and reading her blog. They were also following her on Getter. Not only were they screen capturing her activity, but they were also posting it on Twitter, a place where Duchess of Narcissus no longer had a voice to defend herself. And that, in my opinion, is a real bitch move for them to be doing that, but that's what they did in order to defame, to humiliate, to denigrate, and also to affect her mental health. And they knew she had a medically diagnosed disability, and they still continued to go after her and harass her and to stalk her. So, next up in this framework, there was all this content that was developed to push this narrative around all these single purpose hate accounts online, and everything was strategically timed. So, creating the hashtags, and when everybody would push out the hashtags or the bots that they, have set up, as well as creating other content. So if you've been around, you know that we've had some instances where channels on YouTube have been set up, like the murky side of Megxit, specifically focused on targeting Wally, Taz, Murky Meg, Trevor, and others. Then there was Montecito Royale, who came in pretending to be an ally, but then ended up being a scammer like Duchess Drop Bear.
Hello, all me peeps on the YouTube streets.
When you look back at this stuff, you recognize how evil and cruel Meghan and Harry are, because this all was set up to take Wally down in such a humiliating and hurtful way. Not only Wally was a victim, but also the supporters who donated money to the fundraising campaigns that DDB was running, as well as Montecito Royale. That in itself is criminal that they took off with that money. This social media censorship campaign was relentless. Not only were we being attacked from within, we also had been attacked from externally by other influencers that more than likely Meghan Markle paid to go ahead and regurgitate the narratives that were put into that report. A lot of the information that was in that report was not accurate.
At this point, guys, not even at this point, even from the time of when this even began, it is an illness for you to be this addicted to Meghan Markle and hate her for no reason. Why do you hate this woman? Why are you so obsessed with her that you have these channels? You have so many of them, something called According to Something. You have Murky Meg, you have Yankee Wally. These are some of the three main channels. The documents have been released showing what these channels make. Some of them, $100,000 plus, $3.4 million on an annual basis. This is a full-on business to hate on Meghan Markle. This document is absolutely shocking. So for the fact that they've got a lot away with it for so long, I think is absolutely grotesque.
Keep in mind that this guy was doing the exact same thing to Catherine Middleton that he's accusing Wally, according to Taz, Murky Meg, of doing to Meghan Markle. So understand that these paid influencers do this to support whatever narratives on their platforms. And here we are with this guy spouting out a bunch of garbage, but it doesn't really matter because this is part of the campaign.
It's disgusting. Creating fake accounts, rumors, how do you have time to sit there and create a fake account to hate Meghan Markle? How much time do you have on your hands? How pressed are you? Why do you hate Meghan Markle so much? What has she done to you for you to sit there and waste your time to try and hate her? But are you wasting time? To be honest with you, if you're making millions of dollars, you want to keep on doing stuff like this. This is how dark and crazy it's become and insane it's become, that it's a multi-million-dollar business. These people are raking in money by hating on Meghan Markle. That is how relevant she is. That is how pressed you are. And it's a damning report. And I suggest all you guys to please read it in the link below, because it's just sad, man. What a world we live in. So how sad are you as an individual, as a person, for you to be doing stuff like this? How sad are you? Please.
Now, when you go back to this framework, this asset, as well as the content that came from this asset, was designed to provoke, to motivate, to compel people to take action, whether it be to go and strike their channel and report it, or to just publicly shame them and get other people to do the same in order to coerce or bully these people into silence.
So, not only would we, we decided we're going to publish a series of reports because one report wouldn't be enough. And this was also part of our strategy. But we'll also need to devise a plan to counter, the hate group's activities and try to diminish their ability to manipulate conversations on Twitter.
Now, if you had the chance to watch the first video in this series, I talk about a disinformation technique called the 5 Ds, which represent dismiss, distort, distract, dismay, and divide. Christopher Bouzy uses a couple of these techniques in his so-called strategy.
So, our plan was simple. We would release a series of comprehensive reports, which we did. We would actually use the attacks on me against the hate accounts. So we would flip it on them. And this is one of the things that was driving people crazy, that was seeing this in real time.
So not only is Christopher Bouzy distorting and twisting the narrative to reframe it as this is why we attacked and harassed and bullied and threatened and doxed people. It's because they were doing it to us. And we were just giving them a taste of their own medicine rather than us ignore the trolls and keep peace and calm. We went ahead and incited them to get more angry so they would attack us even more.
And I'm pretty sure many of you that are listening was like, hey, I was wondering why you're amplifying this and retweeting this and doing this, that, and the third. Well, that was part of our strategy from the beginning. From the very beginning, we were going to use their attacks on them because we come from a school of thought that the quote unquote "don't feed the trolls" thing, that's not us. It's like go head in, go in, charge whatever, and use whatever they're putting out, whether it's this or other campaigns, against them.
There was no campaign among any of the users here in this so-called community. In fact, Twitter came back and said that they found no evidence of this being a coordinated campaign and an attack on Meghan. So for him to go ahead and turn around and use that word just shows you that that's exactly what they had been doing and operating at in order to attack innocent people online, which is something that people need to wake up and recognize happened.
And then also release a tool, which we did, to monitor specific accounts, the hate tracker tool, right? So the purpose of that tool was to give you folks the ability to pay attention to certain accounts that were engaging in these targeted harassment campaigns, and to give you the ability to report these accounts, right?
The whole purpose of this hate tracker is not only to put people on a naughty list that were guilty of wrongthink, but also to encourage or motivate people to go ahead and report them if, let's say, they are not in line with the right speech.
So if you have an idea of what to, like what accounts to report, what accounts to track, you have better success at fighting these accounts, whatever. So that tool was and still is instrumental in fighting these accounts.
Keep in mind, this is before Elon Musk bought Twitter and we knew anything about the censorship going on behind the scenes. They still had their contacts, as well as the government still had access into the back door to getting accounts shut down. So what was Bouzy thinking? Was Bouzy thinking that this hate tracker was going to become the de facto standard for us to fight misinformation or truth that only is approved by the left? I think so. Don't you see how important freedom of speech is? We were attacked and we couldn't do anything about it because literally we were being censored. We were attacked unfairly as a result of this campaign. Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook were all a part of it, allowing it to happen.
Yeah, we were basically putting a spotlight on the accounts, and it would just make it difficult for them to continue their harassment or whatever.
Harassment or whatever. You see, he knows that it wasn't harassment. He knows what he had been doing.
Once again, attacked viciously. They were defamed, doxxed, and all types of stuff. So the purpose of that is it's really simple, and it's effective, right? The reason why they do this is if you attack someone, not only you're trying to silence them, scare them into going away, but anyone else that's viewing this, that's watching this, that's observing this, they get scared. So they're like, hey, I'm not going to deal with these crazy people. This is not worth it for me.
And this is exactly what this exercise was about. This was all about changing our behavior into compliance, into not challenging the narratives, going along with what is being force-fed down our throats. This is not the only instance. Meghan and Harry are not the only ones who have been doing this. We had this happen during COVID. We had this happen during our election. So the conservatives were facing the same tactics that these assholes were conducting on us. And this is how they beat us into submission. The fact that they were running these psychological campaigns on all of us and inflicting harm does take a toll on your mental state, and that's exactly what they wanted to achieve. This is the tweet that got Murky Meg banned. Not because she broke any policies or she incited any kind of hatred and violence. No, quite the opposite. She made people laugh. And for that, this totalitarian dictator had her removed. It was a coordinated effort, and certain squatties knew. Murky Meg was another innocent person that they put as a target to go ahead and attack, not only to cause online harm to her mental health, but also to her physical safety. Now, I've been meaning to respond to Murky Meg about this, but in one of her videos, she talks about Omid Scobie putting in his book about a British YouTuber who had threatened Meghan Markle's moon bump by popping it.
It says Meghan was just 2 months away from giving birth to Archie, the first multicultural child in the family. One British-based YouTube account, a channel dedicated to conspiracy theories about Meghan faking her pregnancy, among other wild tales, had even encouraged followers to try and pop the Duchess's moon bump at the future public appearance. She's living in fear, not just for herself, but for the baby. You can't expect anyone to live like that, one of the couple's most senior staff told me at the time. Now, I popped that passage on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, and I said, does anybody know who he's referring to? Knowing very well that I think I knew who it would be, although I've never said anything utterly remotely like that, and I never would, because that's just not my channel. I don't do that. A long time ago, this tweet got put up. Now, I've had to retract some bits because it won't get through YouTube guidelines. Anyway, this is what the Sussex Squad podcast said about me many, many years ago. And I've never publicly said this. I've never really said anything about this because it floored me to be completely honest. And you can probably tell in my voice that it still floors me to think that anybody could think that I would do this. It's disgusting and it's damaging and it's horrid. Anyway, this is what they said about me. This picture, February of 2019, when Murky Meg sent her trolls, a woman in a scarf over her face, to try and Meghan Markle's stomach in New York City to confirm if she was really pregnant or wearing a moon bump. Yep, I was accused of that. Didn't do anything at the time, and everybody that I spoke to privately said I should. I can't. The defamation laws in the UK are so much different to America. It's so much different. You literally need millions of pounds to go for defamation. I would like to ask your opinion. Do you think it's right that that's put in a book like that?
No, Murky, that was not right. But understand that this is not about defamation anymore. This is about the psychological war that they have unleashed onto innocent people. And in this case, being that you had been targeted and put into a group of Caucasian white women, the biased comments, the slander, the insightful language that they have been using, all is to incite hate to harm you. So in this case, it's not about defamation and suing for defamation, but really this is about hate crimes. For all that Harry and Meghan have done, I think they both should be criminally prosecuted, especially for going and attacking innocent people. So for you, Murky Meg, here's the evidence that you might want to have in case in the future you want to maybe exercise and try out that new online safety bill. Just a thought. All these people tie back to the Duke of Sussex.
Whether Murky Meg was verified or not, because I knew what that meant for her. And I knew what that meant for Twitter, because what Twitter was doing was they were basically saying that we are endorsing this hate and people are going to see her as verified. And what happened with her was she got that blue check. She kept putting out this hateful, racist shit, where she's instigating people, telling them to go attack Meghan and stab her stomach and all kinds of stuff that she has instigated. So these are the things that Twitter is now endorsing by verifying her.
So it was the Sussex Squad that started it, and you can see how they manipulated and framed the narrative to then it catch on fire, being repeated not only by other squaddies, but then published in a book. And that was all intentional. That was to not only damage and tarnish Murky Meg's reputation, but also set another example showing people that look at what happens to you if you dare challenge any of the narratives that Meghan Markle is pushing down your throat. You need to worship her and think that she is the best thing since sliced bread. And what was going on at that time was no way Murky Meg was ever going to be able to get back onto Twitter, even if she wanted to open up another account. The Sussex Squad Polizei had been focused on ensuring that not only could she not get back onto Twitter, but also making sure that this was going to trickle over into her YouTube channel as well as any other platform that she wants to use her voice on. So like here with this tweet, you have this asshole saying she is not allowed to start a new account. We need to keep the pressure on her neck. So literally inciting people for violence. She was able to buy a second house from hate. Time to derail her new plans of anti-racism because she got suspended. We don't drink Kool-Aid. And it was these kinds of tweets that were designed to provoke and anger innocent people. And this is what they wanted. They wanted people to get angry. They wanted to drum up this hate that they were trying to cultivate in order to have the excuse to say, you see, it's not safe online. We need to regulate. This is what was going on. But getting back to the assets, or I should say arsenal, that Meghan and Harry had at their disposal to launch this global attack onto people of social media, the assets that Meghan had were not only these bot farms, but also buying over accounts and using them. I wonder how much money Meghan spent in buying accounts. Also, funding proxies is what I believe Bot Sentinel to be, is a proxy or possible government cutout. The group that they created, or this community, is the Sussex Squad terror group. You also have the use of follow trains, which when you look at these accounts by the Sussex Squad, they all are following one another. And that's how you know the clusters. You know the clusters as to who belongs to what and what they're designed to do. Like take, for example, this account, Loopy Lala. This account is in this Sussex Squad hive, but it's tasked to have different conversations as opposed to some of the other sugars. And when you look at the connections, the color-coded, you see a group at the top there in purple. That is the cluster of people who either have been attacked, and that is the subject of the day, or they are the attackers, like Atalanta or Here Piggy Piggy. In this little nest of users, you also have on the outskirts, or still connected, Sarah Data. As you can see, it's being tugged there. And then we have Christopher Boozy, as you can see, being pulled there, connected to these clusters. So now as these attack campaigns were getting set up, there also had to be funding now being put out to pay for all of this, right? For these reports and for the influencers, as well as those managing these bots. So what do? They pretend that they're having some type of fundraiser for these malign actors or ignorant agents that are carrying out these attacks on innocent people to make it look like, oh, we're funding and supporting these organizations who are supposedly nonpartisan. Take, for example, Bot Sentinel. The Sussex Squad had promoted funding and helped support the work that Christopher Boozy was doing, but meanwhile, the funds were coming from you-know-who. If you made it this far, then your head is probably spinning. I know mine is after the last 3 days of going through over 5 terabytes of data that I've been collecting since 2020. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. I don't think that this can be covered in one video, otherwise it would be 4 to 5 hours long. So as much as I wanted to give you all of it, digest this first, because there will be a part 2, as we haven't even gotten into talking about American civil rights being violated and showing what exactly happened to good old American patriotic citizens of the United States of America. So that's going to be in the second part of this video. I hope people understand and see what has been going on. Harry and Meghan had been purposely inflicting harm onto innocent people. And You know, the more people that understand this, the more vocal we can get, because these two should be criminally prosecuted and everybody along with it who participated in it. The whole goal to all of this is to push policy and regulation. And, you know, at this point, I do agree. I do agree that there should be policy and regulation and protection from people like this. There should be laws put around covert influence for malicious harm, because that's exactly what this is. We all know that this is not about the kids. That's just a smokescreen to put more regulation in order to take away free speech and gain more access into your privacy. If we really cared about the safety of our kids, there wouldn't be over 320,000 missing migrant children in the United States at this moment, most likely dead, or sold into a form of slavery. It's the very same people who don't want you to know about this stuff are the ones who are championing for this censorship. Let me leave you with this last tweet by Christopher Boozy. He's telling you exactly what Meghan and Harry have been doing. He writes, "Almost every disinformation smear campaign has an objective: change public opinion, sway voters, get a high-profile figure fired, etc." And I'm going to stop there because that's what it is. This is what Meghan and Harry have been doing this whole entire time. What these two have done is beyond defamation, libel, slander. This is now into criminal territory, which I do think that people who do have authoritative power should be looking into this and should start asking questions. And, you know, justice should be served, because what has gone on is not right. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale.
I was such a fraud.